How's it going, Giants fans? My name is Alex with my co-host here, Anthony Rivardo. If you are new to the Fireside Giants channel, make sure to leave a subscription. And if you like the video, smash that like button as well. Much love as always. Today, we're looking at a big upgrade at right guard and Mark Glowinski. You know, Joe Schoen had some pretty tough salary cap restrictions to maneuver around after Dave Gettleman retired and Joe Judge was let go. And a lot of supplementing draft picks over the past couple of years has kind of brought up the tab a little bit, and now it was time for it to come due, and Joe Schoen had to be a little bit cautious with the way he spent money this offseason, avoid making big contract restructures, but he did make one interesting signing, one lucrative signing for how much money we had, and that was Mark Glowinski, who signed a 3-year, $18 million deal with $11.7 million guaranteed. We want to discuss him, how much better he is than Will Hernandez, replacing him at right guard, and what he's going to bring to this offensive line for the Giants, and really just giving Daniel Jones his best opportunity at succeeding in the NFL and maybe earning a second contract. But before we dive into Glowinski and what he's bringing to this team, Anthony, how are you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing great, and you kind of summed up the Giants offseason perfectly. They didn't have much money to spend. Dave Gettleman left the salary cap situation for the Giants in a bit of a mess on his departure. Joe Schoen inherits this mess and kind of just comes in and cleans it up right away. Now, of course, he had to sacrifice some players. A few players got released or they couldn't be re-signed. You know, some players that come to mind, Logan Ryan, James Bradbury, Jabril Peppers. Really, the secondary kind of got torn to shreds because of the Giants salary cap situation. Even the tight end room got completely torn to shreds as well. They could not re-sign Evan Engram, not that many Giants fans wanted them to. But of course, they also had to cut Kyle Rudolph and Caden Smith. There was a lot of cap casualties on the Giants this year, but they had to spend some money in specific places in order to improve this roster and have some sort of competition entering the 2022 season. So what do? They invest the money back into the number one weakness on the team, which is the offensive line. And when they did that with a splash signing at right guard with Mark Glowinski. Now, it wasn't anything too special, nothing crazy. They didn't sign, the top player on the market. They didn't sign an all-pro here with Mark Glowinski, but what they got is a very solid and reliable starter on the offensive line, which is much harder to come by than you might think in this NFL. And also, it's been a weakness for years. It's just something that the Giants had to address. Glowinski, a veteran, coming off of a solid season in Indianapolis. Indianapolis having one of the best offensive lines in football for the past few years. Glowinski was a really solid player that the Giants brought in. I think this was, if the Giants were going to spend $6 million per year on any position, right guard was the number one spot that they should be investing that money, because of course they don't have that much money, but that is the main weakness. And how important is that position when you're talking about the development of Daniel Jones, the bounce back season that Saquon Barkley wants to have? The right guard position is super important for both of those things, and it's a major factor into whether or not the Giants are going to be winning football games this year. So I think this was a really important signing for the Giants, and I'm very happy to see the right guard position upgraded in such a big way in the 2022 offseason.
Yeah, I mean, they had no choice, right? Will Hernandez, and I'm going to start off this little segment with a statistic that will probably make you guys cringe. But we'll start off with a good portion of the stat, okay? So over the past 3 seasons, Mark Glowinski has given up 7 total sacks over 387 snaps. To give you an example of how terrible the right guard position was for the Giants last year, Will Hernandez gave up 7 sacks last season alone over 1,049 snaps. So you're talking about he gave up as many sacks last year as Glowinski has given up in 3 years combined. So that right off the bat should give you guys an idea of how much better that position is now going to be moving forward. And the Giants really are doing something interesting, right? Because you look at Mike Kafka, you look at that Kansas City Chiefs offense, you look at the Buffalo Bills, they're pass-happy teams. They love to throw the football. The running game isn't necessarily their MO. It's mixed in pretty nicely, but it's not something that they lean on. They really are just throwing the ball an egregious amount and making the most out of it and manufacturing a lot of production for their quarterbacks. What the Giants did this offseason was they built a really strong run-blocking offensive line, which is really interesting in my opinion. Do they have the upside as pass blockers? Absolutely. Andrew Thomas did tremendously well last season developing during his sophomore season. But all these guys are really known for their run blocking. Evan Neal is a specimen, a monster, a mammoth at right tackle, and he is going to carve the way. He's going to freaking pave that road for Saquon Barkley and whoever's running the football in the future at the right tackle position. But he's also more than capable as a pass blocker. He's, has a little bit of some balance issues being at that size, but I think that will only be ironed out with more experience and better coaching at the NFL level. But coming from Alabama, he's pretty much ready to go. Now, Mark Glowinski, he is known for his run blocking attributes, right? Last season, he was absolutely tremendous during the second half of the season. That's really where he made that impact for that Indianapolis Colts team. And if there's anyone you want to steal a good offensive lineman from, it's the Indianapolis Colts, because they know how to run the football. If you're a fantasy football player, I had Jonathan Taylor last season. The guy just carried my team to a championship. And, stealing a top end offensive lineman from top offensive run blocking lines, that is what you want to do. And Mark Glowinski is one of those guys that now is going to bring a ton of experience and knowledge on how to operate a top end run blocking line. So I think that's another little underrated thing that we are getting from Mark Glowinski. But he's no spring chicken. He's been in the NFL for 7 years, so he's a veteran, right? He definitely has experience at the NFL level, right? 6'4", 310 pounds. He's 30 years old, from West Virginia, former fourth-round pick by the Seattle Seahawks back in 2015. He's gotten better over the course of his career, which is really nice. Only had 2 penalties last year, over 843 total snaps. He's reliable. He's durable. He's a guy that can pave the way, and he's aggressive. And, I'll throw a little clip in to this video so you can get an idea of what they're looking for. And he had some pretty good quotes about what the Giants want to do. Bobby Johnson specifically is really looking to kind of build a aggressive offensive line that focuses on toughness. Specifically, he said, I want guys that are tough, and I don't mean physically tough. I mean mentally tough. If you're mentally tough, you'll be physically tough. I don't care what they got in the ACT. I don't care what they got in the Wonderlic. Are they football smart? Can they process the information? Can they solve problems? Mark Glowinski went on and said, that's part of the game. That's what you want. That's the way you want it. You want an O-line. You want smart guys. You also want guys that will dominate and be aggressive and finish and do all the things that it takes to score points. So seems like he fits the mold perfectly for what Bobby Johnson is looking for, which is really, really exciting. And Mark Glowinski, you look at that beard, man, it looks like he chops wood for a living. Those are the type of guys I want.
Absolutely. Mark Glowinski just looks like an aggressive human being. As you can see on the video, he's like kind of in my personal space right now. I'm sharing just my little zone with Mark Glowinski and his very clean shaven, buzz cutted head. I'm kind of petting it right now on the YouTube. And he's got a really awesome beard that I can only dream to grow out. But of course, when we're talking about Mark Glowinski and we're talking about the impact that he's going to make, I think you really said it best when you were talking about his run blocking abilities. And I think that's something where you take a look at Saquon Barkley's career in the NFL and you take a look at his career in college, and they're completely different things, because in college, it was historic. He's the greatest running back prospect to ever grace the face of the earth, according to Dave Gettleman, and many other very talented draft evaluators really viewed him that way. So Saquon Barkley coming out of Penn State was this otherworldly specimen, gets to the NFL first season, looks like everything that he was described as second, third, and fourth years. I mean, what the hell happened? Injuries. Put on top of that, bad play calling, and put on top of that, really poor offensive line play. I remember the 2019 season, that game against the Jets. I believe it was week 11. Saquon Barkley finished the game with -1 total rushing yards. -1 yard in an entire game. And go back and watch that game. Go on NFL Game Pass if you've got it. Go look at the film. That is like the worst offensive line performance in a running game that I have ever seen in my life. It was an atrocity. The play calling was also really bad by Pat Shurmur. For what Pat Shurmur was good at, developing Daniel Jones for a year, he did a decent job in the passing game, whatever. His rushing scheme was horrible, but he also suffered because he had a terrible offensive line helping him implement that rushing scheme. I mean, missed blocks left and right. That was like a really bad game from the center spot. Shane Lemieux struggled, the right guard spot, everywhere. Just the offensive line collapsed in that game. And this offseason, Joe Schoen has kind of made it a point to say that will never happen to Saquon Barkley again. There will never be a game where he doesn't even have the opportunity to gain a yard on the ground now, because now he's got good offensive linemen in front of him. Andrew Thomas, after 2 years, is a good offensive lineman. Evan Neal is going to step into the NFL and day one be a good offensive lineman. Mark Glowinski is a proven veteran NFL offensive lineman who is at least good or average. He's a good player, and he's a big improvement over the inconsistent type that we were getting from Will Hernandez. Because if you go back and watch that 2019 game, guys like Will Hernandez just couldn't pick up a block in the running game. They just could not get to the second level. They could not even get finished with their first assignment right in front of them. That nose tackle was beating down Giants offensive linemen all game long. And granted, yeah, the Jets had some talent on defense, but back then, but come on, guys, it's the freaking Jets. They were not a good football team, and the Giants got worked. They could not even gain a yard on the ground. That will never happen again as long as Mark Glowinski, Evan Neal, Andrew Thomas, and Joe Shane constructing this offensive line. If those guys are all together, that's not happening anymore. Saquon Barkley will have rushing lanes. He'll be able to run through the gap between his guard and his tackle on the right side between, Mark Lewinsky and Evan Neal, and he's going to be able to pick up yardage pretty much every single time they call a run to that side because those are two dominant run blockers. Mark Lewinsky does have moments where he is dominant in the running game. We know that Evan Neal has that dominant ceiling in both the running game and the passing game. So this is something to be super excited in. This is a major upgrade at right guard for the Giants. Will Hernandez, we tried for years to get him to develop into something decent for the Giants. It just didn't work out. Okay, you cut your losses, you move on. He was a second-round pick in 2018 with the old regime. New regime just comes in, signs a veteran that they know is going to be good. We don't need to develop somebody and take a chance on anybody. No, just get a decent veteran in Mark Lewinsky, watch him go to work, and watch Saquon Barkley, as a result of that, get to work and have a bounce-back season.
Absolutely. That's well said. And, I'll throw in a couple more things. Glowinski has a pretty even split when it comes to run blocking snaps and pass blocking snaps. 367 run blocking and 476 pass blocking last year. So, Indianapolis runs the ball a fair amount. So, the sample size is massive for Mark Glowinski. The numbers, they're great for the most part. Maybe not great, but I'll say they're above average. And he has a big sample size to prove that he's a good quality run blocker. And I didn't really like the power zone scheme or power gap scheme the Giants really utilized last year. I'm not a big fan of using Saquon Barkley as a power runner. I'd like to see them run a more outside zone scheme and, expose those wide zones and those C gaps, with Evan Neal leading the charge and Daniel Bellinger out wide. I think that that's really where the NFL is going in terms of like having those great running attacks. Like when you're looking at the 49ers, and Indianapolis was a little bit unique because Jonathan Taylor's just a monster and they had phenomenal interior guards with Quentin Nelson and Glowinski. But I think that I like the outside zone scheme or the wide zone scheme just for Saquon Barkley because it gives him more time to pick where he's going to go. He's not a decisive runner, right? Like when he has the opportunity to burst through a hole, whatever it might be, or he has to pick a hole, he sometimes makes the wrong choice. And I think that Saquon Barkley is best when you give him the time to see it and then hit it hard. That's where I think he is going to make it the most of his money. And that's where he's going to really have that resurgent season, is giving him the time with good blockers out in front to find that lane and then expose it, instead of having him make a decision when there's no lane, there's basically no gap for him to run through, and the offensive line is falling apart, and you're just running him up the middle, and he's not a power runner, especially when you're trying to force it on him coming off an ACL tear, like to put pressure on that knee and run with power and carry guys for multiple yards. That's not what you want to be doing, in my opinion. And I think that they're going to understand how to utilize it a little bit more effectively moving forward, especially as a receiver to go with it. But let's dive into a couple of clips. We'll just kind of watch some run blocking from Mark Glowinski, and you guys can get an idea of what he's bringing to this squad. All right, so let's see here. Probably just not fitting the whole screen, but you'll see nonetheless that Mark Glowinski is pretty damn quick and he's strong as hell. I mean, look, that's a huge defensive tackle he just pushed out of the way.
Yeah, Glowinski is definitely one of those mauler types. Once he gets his hands on you, he's going to keep driving those legs and he's going to push you back. And that's something that you really love, especially the tenacity to have in the running game. Just kind of being one of those guys, fires out of his stance. And I really love this play right here because this shows a really great job sealing off a defensive lineman. When you're a good offensive lineman, you're not only pushing the defensive tackles back and, creating a cushion from the offensive line, the line of scrimmage, you're also turning and manipulating the body language of that defensive tackle. You're turning them away and you're sealing them off and creating a clean hole for your rusher to run through, which is really good. Of course, the Colts benefited because they played with, Jonathan Taylor, right? Mark Glowinski was blocking for Jonathan Taylor, who's one of the best running backs in the NFL right now. But now Saquon Barkley can hopefully have a breakout season similar to what Jonathan Taylor had, because he'll have some really good run blockers in front of him, like Glowinski, who's right there getting a nice pancake. And, you see him turning the lineman off and then getting on top of him. That's really what you need. And it's something that the Giants offensive line has been missing for the past couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, he's a people mover, similar to Evan Neal. These guys just move bodies at line of scrimmage. And I like how he also uses that shoulder leverage so he can disengage and get to the second level, and he can make secondary blocks. He pushes those defensive tackles into other guys. He has that physical, functional strength just to move bodies. And I think that's going to be a huge differing factor. Look at the leverage he gets there. He squares off his block, and then there goes the running back. He does a really good job of squaring off those guys and not letting his assignments get around him. So like overall, you can just see like it just constantly winning these reps. And when you have a guy who was going to win the majority of his run blocking reps, like you're going to have success. Especially with Evan Neal and Daniel Bellinger alongside them. So I think like, comparably last year you have Nate Solder, Will Hernandez, and Evan Ingram. Then now you have Daniel Bellinger, Evan Neal, and Mark Glowinski, 3 entirely new players who are way, way better. I mean, Evan Neal, I would say, is better than Nate Solder on day one, never having seen a snap from him. Mark Glowinski, I think, way better than Will Hernandez. The stats back that up. And then Daniel Bellinger is known for his run blocking capabilities, getting to the second level, has really good straight line speed. Evan Ingram was never really a great functional blocker. And then the Giants tried to supplement that with Kyle Rudolph, who also was not a good blocker. The guy was stuck in quicksand half the time. Honestly, I didn't even think he had feet at one point. I thought he was just like kind of standing there with peg legs, couldn't even move. So like, more athleticism overall, younger players, aggressive, mean. This is a whole different unit, guys. This is a different offensive line than what we saw last year. You can see since when have we seen aggressive lists like this, capable of sealing blocks with great technique. Like Will Hernandez would always lose his leverage. He had the strength and he had the power, but he would get tossed around. Like he would get maneuvered. They would just shift his whole frame out of the way. And he would get exposed on that end. So like you're seeing Glowinski, once he gets his hands on you, like Anthony said, he gets his hands on you, man. He's not letting go. Like he's gonna move you. He's gonna freaking take you, and he's going to put you where he wants. And he's gonna open up that lane. He's gonna square you off and make sure that gap is wide open for him. And you can see like the Colts here. They also ran a lot of inside. They really exposed those B gaps and A gaps. But when you have running backs with that much agility, like Saquon, Jonathan Taylor, even Nyheim Hines is pretty good agility. Like you don't necessarily always need to have perfect blocks. Like they will find ways to get the ball downfield. But running behind good guards, it makes a difference, man. You're going to see a big difference between Glowinski, Willer Hernandez, and even Shane Lemieux. We'll see if he can win a starting job this year. But I think this right side of the line, Saquon Barkley is going to have a field day. There are going to be a lot of strong side runs to that side. And we're going to see a lot more production out of this group. But overall, really excited about Glowinski. I think he's going to be a big addition to this team, guys. I'd love to hear your perspectives below on YouTube, as always. I'm curious to hear your thoughts, what you think this offensive line is going to do, how you would compare them really to last year's unit, and if you think that the right side, Saquon Barkley, can have that resurgent season. But as always, make sure to like, subscribe, and we'll catch you guys on the next Fireside Giants episode.
TVSO.